Good Tuesday to you, everybody in Com 785. Welcome again to week 10 and my review of your readings from week boom 9. 9. 9. What if I said it? 9. Okay, I got it. All right, clearly I am not sufficiently caffeinated. Much better. Okay, how's everybody doing? I hope you had a chance to go see the video concerning this week's readings and then a little bit about the next unit. That is our unit concerning the not-for-profit world. All right, but so if you haven't, go over and check that out. So for this video, we're going to take a look at the questions from last week and some of your answers, and I'm going to add a few things that I hope you will find useful. Okay, so let's just get right into it. All right, so for this last week, we were taking a look. We had a very short reading from Wilson et al. We were taking a look, from Cialdini. We were taking a look at the elements of unity. All right, those things that help persuade. And now remember, there is the one chapter in Cialdini that if you can't read anything else, or if you're ever looking for a refresher, like, what did this say? What did this say? Go back to the chapter in which he lists his 6 principles of influence or persuasion. Both those will serve you well. All right. But in this one, and I as I said when I set it up, I'm not really crazy about the analogies that he draws by using, say, behaviors of people during the Holocaust. It's not that I have a problem with virtuous behavior during the Holocaust, that there were so many other factors at play. I don't know if that's the strongest case that he could have made by way of example. I'm not saying what he had to say isn't true. That's not my point. I'm not saying that people during the Holocaust didn't help people. That's not my point. I'm saying that to use the one as an example of the other. I mean, it is an interesting question. Why did Sugihara act the way he did and issue all the visas? All right. I mean, there was obviously a reason. But what the question that we're interested in, that we want to drill down on, are these principles of like region and locality and familiarity, do they translate to a digital environment? Okay. Now, I'm going to say something in general to a lot of you who answered these questions. And I said this in the video in which I discussed the readings. And set the readings up. In each of them, you note that I asked for your informed opinion. What I mean by that, what I'm looking for is if you state a position on something, what's your evidence? I want you, by way of scholarship, to make that a default in your thinking. Okay? If you've come to a conclusion about something, make sure that you're familiar enough with the evidence that led you to that conclusion that you could, bam, point to it. Now, interestingly, and this belongs in the other video, but in the readings this week, when you get to Wilson et al., one of the bits that you're gonna go through is there's sort of a matrix for ethical decision making. Okay, and then there are some dictates. Not really a matrix, but some, here, do this, concerning the embracing of diversity, a topic that's gotten much ink in so many years. Okay, in both instances, all right, for you to move through, say, the metric effectively or consider the talking points meaningfully, each of those processes requires that you take a look at whatever blind spots you do or don't have. And blind spots are conclusions that we have that are not evidence-based. They're usually experience-based. And if you've heard me discuss about emotional intelligence, there's a place for that, but we have to be careful. So when you see the term "in your informed opinion," that's what I'm looking for. Do you have evidence to back what it is that you throw out there? Okay, let's take a look at the questions. Question number 1: in your informed opinion, does the uniting force of region apply in a social media environment? So what I'm after is, we often hear about virtual space this and community that. Does that foster a sense? Does the virtual space foster a sense of regional connectivity? All right. So let's take a look. Nicolette, I like what you're up to here. You say, Cialdini, the experience of unity is not just about simple similarities, although one can work those too. Very true. Okay. Let's see. Where'd you go again here? Here we go. But to a lesser degree, via the liking principle, share identities and how individuals define themselves in their groups and socioeconomic backgrounds. The uniting force of region can be applied to groups formulated on social media. Okay. Before you can join many private groups, you have to answer a series of questions and ultimately determine simple similarities. Okay. And I picked this because I found that really interesting. And I, although I study it, I don't, as a participant, spend a lot of time in these various groups. So do you mean like, before you can get a TikTok or a Snapchat chat account or a Pinterest account, you have to answer these little questions? If that's what you mean, then I can tell you this is not for the purpose of unity. This is for the purpose of data mining, and really has nothing to do with region. All right. So just so we're very clear, I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, Nicolette. I'm just saying that if you are, that's not what's going on. Okay. But anyway, let's get back to you. Ultimate term is simple similarities. For example, the community in which I live has a group on Facebook. You have to be familiar with the history and landmarks of the area to join the particular group. And that's interesting. Now, I have belonged to a few Facebook groups in which there are similar, filters that you have to get through. So, okay, I understand what you mean. Okay. That is one way they could potentially weed out those members whose thought processes are not aligned with the group if they do not live in the community. I do think this is a way of you. Do I think this way of uniting is foolproof? Absolutely not. Even in those private social settings, there will always be infiltrators who are only there to disturb the status quo of the group's intention. And I, when I read that, I was like, well, what do you mean? You mean like trolls or lurkers? These are old terms from the internet for people that just hang around chat groups and don't really contribute. But I thought that was interesting. Okay. But for many of you, what's lacking from your answer is some citation. Okay, so there are a couple of exceptions. Cheryl, you had a very interesting citation to your work. Okay, so when you see in your informed opinion, show me where the information comes from. Okay, question number 2. Consider Cialdini's thoughts on locality. Find and discuss an example of how companies or individuals have tried to project and establish a sense of shared locality on social media. All right, and this actually goes on all over the place. Brandy, you went first on this. Actually, you went first on most of them, but we'll just take you first on this one. Cialdini ascertains locality is an existing unity that can be leveraged to establish a sense of shared experience among groups and individuals. As we've learned in other chapters, this connection is useful in marketing campaigns, the public's ability to relate and internalize a product or initiate influences their actions. Consider the localization strategy of Airbnb, a business that has grown exponentially over the past decade because of its targeted locality strategies. They diversify their offerings to provide more than vacation rentals. They offer thoughtful experiences in almost 200 countries. You know, and I found this example interesting in the sense of, or, you know, what are you trying to say here, Brandy? That the tactic by Airbnb is turning the anywhere, and I've stayed in a lot of Airbnbs and in different countries. The anywhere, okay, so you can go to a house in, you know, Ireland or you know, anywhere that this thing participates, mostly Western country or France. They're turning the anywhere into a somewhere that you're familiar with. Is you know, for clarification, is that what you're suggesting? That's an interesting suggestion about this company. Okay. They offer thoughtful experiences in almost 200 countries, in addition to attracting tourists to their platform by creating opportunity for authentic experiences. Their host pool continues to grow over the years. People are attracted to the idea of local experiences when they travel that are not as limited as hotels or resorts. And then you have you know, a nice link to this story in Hacker Noon, which I'm not really familiar with, but Airbnb business case study, what makes Airbnb so successful. And I think, you know, I think you're essentially right. And if you look at Airbnb's marketing, they're, you know, one of the, they're sort of a rotation of stock commercials that they have. And the theme of those stock commercials are people going somewhere and being made to feel like they belong there. They're part of the local scene. Okay. Okay. So interesting answer. All right. Question number 3. Consider Cialdini's discussion of kinship. Find an example of language that a company uses to trigger a sense of family among its customers or employees. In your informed opinion, is this corporate tactic effective? Briefly explain your answer. And this sort of tactic is all over in the market and marketing place. Hear it all the time. I just wanted to know what you think. Daryl, I like what you're up here. You point out Cialdini explains as a need to care for those who we genetically related to. You know, by the way, have I mentioned Jordan Peterson? I think I have. I'm just going to reach for a book. Excuse me 1 second. All right. Now, you know, it's unfortunate that a lot of his works have been given sort of a political stripe. Okay. But Dr. Peterson is, I believe, one of the preeminent living thinkers of our time. And certainly within the realm of communication, what he is up to should interest you. Okay. So let me recommend a few books. His first work was a, you know, major academic publication, Maps of Meaning. All right. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. I think I've read it 4 times, maybe, and I'm still pulling stuff out of it. It is a very dense work. Okay. And it essentially gets at the question, why do we derive meaning through our interactions with the world? How do we derive meaning? And how do we communicate that meaning amongst ourselves? So in many ways, it is a deep, deep cross-culture, cross-time, cross-geography dive into that little question that we read in Cialdini about what's language for? What's the purpose of language? And Cialdini speculates, you know, he throws his lot in with those who say that the purpose of language is to both trigger and communicate that something has, that the trigger has been triggered. I don't mean trigger like, oh, you offended me, but trigger like something happened, of association. All right. Meaning to experience. I experienced this. This is what it means. All right. I experienced this. This is what it means. That book is a deep dive into that process across a whole bunch of different cultures and different places. Very, very interesting. But anyway, the reason that I bring it up is, his next book that he followed that was with 12 Rules for Life. All right. This is shorter. It's a little chippier than the first one, but it's still well worth your reading. And as Cialdini points out, the exchange offers stimulation with the self, because when you help those who are your part of your family to a degree, taking care of yourself, because family is an extension of you. One of the human habits that Peterson gets into in this book is our habit of caring for those that we see as dependent upon ourselves. And he flips the script on that. He's saying, look, if you want to see to your own well-being, which you should, try to conceptualize yourself as someone that you are responsible for that can't help himself or something, like your dog. All right, your dog, no opposable thumb, so your dog can't work the can opener. And so, the dog is highly dependent on you or your cat or whatever for food. Okay. So yes, Daryl, you're right. All right. This is the principle that's at work with kinship. All right, but let's get to your answer. I work in D.C., but I live in Newport News, Virginia. It's about a 3-hour drive to get to D.C. since COVID. I've been able to work from home, but we are required to go to the office at least twice per pay period. So that's what, every 2 weeks or something? Okay. When I'm in D.C., I stay on the Army base. Holiday Inn has a hotel on base, and their motto is welcome home. I don't particularly think this tactic works because it's a business, and they will do what they need to do and say what they need to say to make sure the business keeps coming their way. It just doesn't seem genuine. From a corporate standpoint, I don't feel like there's been an extension of kinship to me. I do, however, appreciate the staff. Since I'm a regular, I do feel like there's a sense of kinship with the staff because we recognize each other. But I think the kinship I think that the kinship that's established is not by design, more by practical situation of being a regular customer. Okay, excellently said. All right. And by the way, I've had similar experiences in hotels in far-flung parts of the world, Iraq in particular, where I stayed at the same hotel so many times that they started greeting me, by my first name. Although, or say, even though sometimes our stays were 2 or 3 months apart until I would be back again. So I understand what you're saying. I tend to agree. Now, this is my opinion. And I would love to see a quantitative study as to whether this tactic, these words that strike familiarity, and I mean in the sense of familia, meaning family, that strike that, do they actually work? All right. Now, from a personal perspective, they tend to annoy me, and that's just because I teach this for a living, and I've now become, whether I'm not like, I don't prowl around going, oh, what's your language? But I'm simply conditioned to look at ads differently than I did, say, 10 years ago, and to look at language very differently than I have in other parts of my life. And so when I see the greater the gap between the stated facts of the situation and the facts of the situation, the bigger that gap is, the less impressed I am. Okay, it's like someone calling their garage sale an estate sale. I sort of like, really? Come on. Okay. So that's my personal opinion. All right. But if you have others, again, let's, I'd love to see the data. I mean, I'm not saying, prove me wrong, but I would love to see the data. Okay. Question number 4, and let's wrap this up. Consider Cialdini's chapter 11 on being together. In your informed opinion, can social media function as a place to build unity across the United States? Briefly explain and justify your answer. Now, the reason I put this in there was, hitherto, maybe 40 years ago, maybe even less than that, 20, 30 years ago, it was the stated goal of media and media platforms to develop unity across the United States. That those who cast the United States as a monolith, and especially in the verbal wars over race and ethnicity that cast the U.S. as a monolith of a particular race or a particular ethnicity. They're simply ignorant of history. It's true. The overwhelming majority of the peoples that come here that form the core of the United States are of European descent. That's true. But what is also true is that Europeans, even though they have this, this legal structure now that is the EU, they do not see themselves as a monolithic people in many, many ways. And they've been letting the blood out of each other by the gallons to prove that point for centuries, certainly during the period in which they were arriving in what becomes the United States to populate, the land. And that's why I entitled this question "E pluribus unum?" ? And that's of course the national slogan. Means from many one, or from one many, however you want to translate your Latin. Okay, so prior to the sort of the fractionalization brought on by online media, and maybe even I think it's really started with cable television, in which you started to see this balkanizing, the segmentizing of the audience. There was active and purposeful design, open and active discussion about how media platforms could, and it was just assumed that they should be a uniting force. That consideration is gone. It's not even a conversation. It's not even oh hey yeah, gone. All right, and I'm not quite sure that the overarching effects are good ones. That concerns me. So that's why I posed the question. Okay, Brandy. I struggle with this question on a regular basis. Chialdini has broadened my perspective on social media and influence as a community in various ways. However, I hesitate to define it as a place. All right, I agree. Part of the hesitation stems from a desire to protect and preserve organic means of connection that allow for authentic exchange. I believe that social media platforms are incapable of providing. Again, I would agree. All right. In the online environment, I control my response as well as my exposure to information and experience. In contrast, the unplanned experience with a stranger in a social setting like the grocery store, church, place of business stretches my ability to connect and communicate. I agree. There is a distinct difference between intended and unintended connection. From an organizational standpoint, the idea that social media can build unity is controversial. All right. And again, now, I'm going to let you guys answer this. But again, I always go, yeah, the greater the distance between the stated facts, like what this thing says it's going to do, and what it actually does, the bigger that gap gets, the more, chin stroking that you see out of me. It is discomforting from a marketing aspect because despite the global reach and cost effectiveness of using social media platforms as a tool, the same platforms make organizations vulnerable to reputational crisis as well as impact their control over their public. Very, very true. Okay. Organizations are dependent upon favorable opinions. We're going to read about that in the next reading and what that's doing to the nature of information. Of influence are really ones controlling public opinion at this point. As much as social media can function as a unifier, it can also be divisive and dangerous. All right. Now, I would not you, Brandy, but I would challenge the idea that it's a unifier. I think it's a fragmentizer, if I can make up a word, which is not unification. But I digress. Back to you. One buzzword that I think perfectly, perfect word, I just lost my place. Perfectly respond. Is this a typo? Resonates with this conversation and my point of view is intimacy. There is a lack of intimacy in mediated platforms. This article published by Washington Post considers some interesting aspects of this topic, and here's the link. It is possible, and research shows very smart to leverage social media platforms as a tool of engagement, but in my informed opinion, nothing beats a handshake or a cup of coffee with someone you can engage, collaborate, connect with face-to-face. And by the way, your hunches are being borne out. And if you didn't, folks, go look at the Washington Post article. I don't know if it's behind a paywall or not, because I have a subscription to the Washington Post. But anyway, but the title is The Science of Being There, Why Face-to-Face Meetings Are So Important. The data is stacking up wide and deep concerning the inferior outcome of meetings on Zoom as opposed to face-to-face. You just from a purely productivity standpoint, you get more done when you're in the same room. All right, so good answers, one and all. Okay, everybody, that's like 25 minutes, which is 5 minutes more than I intended to go. All right. Keep working on your semester projects, work in those groups. All right. Look at the other video about the readings for this week. I've got an announcement in there about, where I will and will not be and what to expect. There's going to, the videos for the week of the 24th are going to be a little bit later, but you can go over in the other video and watch that. Okay. So after you do, I will see you in the discussion boards on Blackboard. All right, everybody. Have a great week. God bless. Bye-bye.